By the time the ballroom doors swung open, I already knew I was the joke. Not because I'd done anything wrong, but because my whole body carried the evidence of a life that didn't come with sponsors. Have you ever felt judged before you even breathed in places like this? My dress was black and simple, the kind you buy on clearance and pray nobody notices twice. My heels pinched, not because they were fancy, but because they were old. I'd skipped lunch to make my paycheck stretch. Tonight was supposed to be charity, but it felt like an auction. At 6:40 p.m., I'd stood in my kitchen staring at the same envelope of bills, then at Zoey's backpack by the door. My daughter was 6 years old and full of questions. I kissed her forehead and promised I'd be back before morning even though I didn't believe myself. Grandma June arrived smelling like laundry soap and peppermint, the safe scent of someone who never let me drown. Zoey ran to her, and my chest tightened with relief and jealousy. Relief because help had arrived. Jealousy because Zoey looked happier for a second with her than with me tonight. I went anyway because Grant Sloan made it sound optional the way storms sound optional. My boss had leaned over my cubicle and reminded me I represented the company, as if my body was a billboard. Refusing would cost me shifts, maybe my job, definitely my dignity before the night. By 7:30 p.m., the historic Chicago ballroom glittered like it had never heard the word rent. Chandeliers threw light onto tuxedos and sequins, and every laugh sounded rehearsed. I checked my phone for a message from June, then tucked it away like a secret I couldn't afford to share. Vanessa Hart found me fast, like a shark that smelled weakness through perfume. She wore a pale dress that probably had its own security team. Her friends circled, bracelets clinking, eyes scanning me the way people scan price tags. Their smiles landed first, then their meaning, and I felt it. At first it was the soft stuff, the kind you can deny later. They admired my courage for coming alone. They noticed how practical my shoes looked. They asked where I bought my dress with a tone that made the question into a verdict. I tried to laugh like them. Then Vanessa turned it into entertainment. She tilted her head, looked me up and down, and made a little show of pity. Her friends responded on cue, a chorus of giggles that grew louder when I didn't retreat. Do you know what it's like to be mocked politely by everyone? I kept thinking about Zoey's bedtime story, the one with the brave rabbit who always found home. My rabbit was going to ask why mommy wore lipstick on a Monday. I needed this paycheck, I needed health insurance, so I stood there and swallowed the heat rising in my throat. The spotlight moment came when someone loudly suggested I should pose for a photo, because charity loved an underdog. A few heads turned. Phones lifted. My face burned. Vanessa's smile widened, satisfied, like she'd finally gotten the room to agree I didn't belong. I took a step back and tripped. I fled toward the edge of the crowd, pretending I needed fresh air, pretending my eyes weren't wet. The hallway smelled like roses and money, then like polish and silence. I pressed my palm to my stomach and breathed. Why did I always have to be the one who endured? That was when the laughter behind me changed. It didn't fade. It snapped, like a lid slammed onto a boiling pot. The air thickened, and movement rippled through the corridor. People stepped aside without thinking. My skin prickled. Every instinct whispered the same thing: someone powerful was coming right now. I turned, expecting security or Grant, ready to scold me for making a scene. Instead I saw the crowd parting, as if space itself chose a direction. Men in dark suits watched, faces blank. The man at the center walked with calm certainty, like hurry was for other people only. He carried power the way other men carried cologne, invisible but impossible to ignore. Dark hair, jaw, eyes that never asked permission. He moved past the chandeliers like they were props. When his gaze found me, my breath stuttered. Not attraction first, but the feeling I was prey and protected. Behind him, whispers moved without sound, carried by posture. Caruso. Dominic. The name hit like a rumor I'd avoided for years, tied to money and darker stories people tell only in elevators. My hands went cold. Why was a man like that walking straight toward me when I needed cover? His attention stayed on me like a hand on my back, steadying. I realized I was trembling, not only from humiliation, but from the possibility someone might choose my side. He lifted his hands slowly, palm open, and I watched the movement like it was a verdict for my life. I should have stepped away. I should have asked who he thought he was. Instead, my fingers met his, because my body recognized safety before my pride could argue. The contact was gentle, almost formal, and it told everyone watching this wasn't a rescue for show. It was a claim. We stepped back into the ballroom, and the laughter collapsed into silence. Vanessa's face tightened. Grant looked small. Dominic held my hand as if it belonged there, raising it just enough to make the room focus. I couldn't breathe. I knew he was about to introduce me as his wife. The ballroom swallowed us whole again, and the sound died as if someone had cut a wire. Dominic held my hand at waist height, not squeezing, just steady, and he said my name like it belonged beside his. Then he called me his wife. One sentence, and the room rearranged itself around us. My cheeks burned, but my spine straightened without permission. I could still taste the cheap champagne and the humiliation, yet suddenly it had nowhere to land. Have you ever felt your whole life change in a single breath, before you could protest, and pretend it did not? Vanessa's smile froze mid-curve, glossy as plastic. Her friends stopped blinking, wrists heavy with jewelry they suddenly wished could hide them. People who had laughed a minute ago looked down at their glasses, as if eye contact might be counted as participation. A path opened behind Dominic the way crowds part for sirens. I heard his last name travel in whispers, Caruso, followed by softer words like billionaire, untouchable, and the kind of connections nobody explains out loud. The security men at the edges did not rush in, they simply watched, like this was normal, like he was the rule. He turned his attention from me to the small circle that had been feeding on my embarrassment. He did not raise his voice, yet everyone leaned closer, as if quiet carried sharper edges. He named what they had done without using their cute little euphemisms. It was humiliation dressed up as humor, and it only felt safe because they assumed I was powerless. He made that point sink in, and I watched their confidence drain away. In his calm, he promised consequences, not revenge theater, but the certainty that doors would close to people who enjoyed hurting someone for sport. Relief hit first, like finally stepping out of a room with no air. Then shame chased it, because I hated meeting anyone, especially a man whose name carried shadows. I pictured Zoey at Grandma June's table, swinging her legs, asking why grown-ups were mean, and my throat tightened. What if this became a headline that followed my child to school? What if I had just been pulled into a story I couldn't control? Dominic's hand stayed steady, and part of me wanted to cling to it, while another part wanted to yank free and run back to my ordinary life. Vanessa tried to recover with a tremor in her lips, folding her hands as if prayer could rewrite the last 10 minutes. One of her friends lifted her clutch like a shield, another stared at the floor so hard I thought she might dig a hole through marble. Grant hovered nearby, sweating through his confidence, calculating how fast he could pretend he had always respected me. Dominic let them twist in their own discomfort. He stayed polite in the way knives can be polished, and the message was clear: their cruelty was noted, remembered, and now attached to their names. Instead of walking away after the damage was done, Dominic shifted his grip and guided me toward the dance floor. The band had never stopped playing, it had just waited for permission to be heard again. Couples moved in slow circles, but our entrance created a center of gravity. People watched us the way they watched storms on the lakefront, half afraid, half unable to look away. He placed his hand at my waist with restraint, and I realized the waltz was not romance first. It was a declaration. I was under his protection, and everyone needed to learn it. My steps were clumsy at first, but he adjusted without embarrassment, as if he had already decided I was worth patience. His cologne smelled like cedar and clean winter air. I felt safer and more exposed at the same time, like standing under a spotlight with a bulletproof vest. Around us, Vanessa's clique kept shrinking, trying to fade into chandeliers and mirrors. I could sense rumors forming, stories people would repeat tomorrow. Did he understand he was editing my future with every turn of this dance? I wanted to be angry. Instead, My heartbeat kept saying yes even while resisting. I waited until the song ended, then I finally faced him with the questions I'd been swallowing. I let him sense my confusion, my anger, and the shame of gratitude. He did not flinch. He watched me like he expected the storm. Then he offered a memory, a rainy morning weeks ago by a bus stop, an older man dropping groceries, a small boy crying. I had knelt, gathered apples, and shared my umbrella. Dominic had been there, unnoticed, and remembered. He wanted me to understand the wife claim was strategy, and also desire, and my body heard him anyway. He did not ask me to smile. He moved as if staying in that ballroom was a risk he refused. His hand stayed at my back, guiding, and people shifted out of our path again. I saw Vanessa watching from behind a pillar, her face drained of color, and I understood her power over me had evaporated. That should have felt like victory. Instead, my stomach churned. Zoey's face flashed in my mind, and I remembered I was a mother. Dominic kept steering me toward the exit and the night, away from gossip and into something larger than a scandal. When Dominic guided me toward the doors, the ballroom noise faded behind us like a song swallowed by thick velvet. My lungs finally filled. I should have felt victorious, but I felt exposed, like my skin had been peeled back in public and left shining under every curious chandelier tonight. Outside, at 9:15 p.m., Chicago hit me with cold air and traffic hiss. Valet lights flashed on wet pavement. A cluster of men in dark coats stood too still, watching angles and exits. The city felt normal, yet I sensed danger waiting under it like a storm behind glass. A long black car waited at the curb, polished so perfectly it reflected my tired face. Its door looked like an invitation and a warning. I had spent years keeping my life small for safety. This car promised protection, but it also promised locks and rules I did not know. The man beside the car did not smile with his mouth, only with his eyes. He wore a tailored suit and moved like someone trained to notice threats first, people second. I later learned his name was Ethan Cruz, Dominic's right hand and gatekeeper, and he watched me carefully too. He opened the back door with a smooth gesture, then glanced toward Dominic as if waiting for permission. His expression carried dry amusement, the kind that says he has seen chaos before and survived it. I realized he was not a driver. He was a witness to power and consequences. When I slid onto the leather seat, warmth wrapped around me, and the city noise vanished. The door closed with a final sound that made my stomach tighten. In that hush, I understood the turning point. I had stepped into Dominic's rulebook, not mine, and it scared me more tonight. I tried to anchor myself with questions in my head: where are we going, why, and for how long? Dominic answered with certainty, as if every problem had a solution purchased. I hated that part of me wanted to accept it. Exhaustion makes comfort seductive, even when it costs later. Then he mentioned Zoey, not by asking, but by acknowledging her existence like a fact. My chest clenched. It was not a threat, just observation, the way he had observed kindness at the bus stop. Still, my first instinct was anger. How much did he know about us already tonight? He made it clear he noticed details: the scuffed phone case, the tired way I checked the time, the mother habits I could not hide. Part of me felt exposed again. Another part felt seen, respectfully, and that confused me. Can being noticed feel like safety and danger at once? My mind jumped to consequences. Tomorrow, a photo could land in a parent group chat. A teacher could look at Zoey differently. Her father, who collected excuses, could use gossip as ammunition. I pictured court forms. Dominic's protection felt comforting, but also like a spotlight aimed at my child too. Grandma June told me to breathe when life got loud, but I kept calculating rent, groceries, and school shoes. A man like Dominic could erase problems with a gesture. I wondered if that was generosity or control wearing manners. I stared at my hands, still warm where he held them. The car rolled through downtown, then toward my neighborhood, and the skyline faded behind us. Dominic did not pry for romance. He focused on getting me home intact, like that was the objective. When we stopped, my building looked smaller than ever. I felt humiliation, then pushed it down hard. Ethan stayed by the curb, scanning the street with practiced patience. Dominic walked me to the steps, close enough that strangers would think we belonged together. My heart hated how safe that felt. Have you ever wanted to trust someone because it was easier? I kept my keys ready anyway. Before I could retreat into my hallway, Dominic set a plan for tomorrow. He framed it as clarity, not romance, a chance to speak without crowds and rumors. He wanted noon and my consent. I should have refused, but I agreed anyway. I told myself it was only information first. The car glided away, taking Dominic's shadow with it, and I stood on the sidewalk listening to my breath. The windows looked ordinary. I felt like the city had shifted by 1 degree. My phone buzzed with a notification, and my stomach dropped. The internet had already found me too. Upstairs, I kicked off my shoes and checked messages with shaking hands. A photo from the gala had become a rumor. I pictured Zoey asleep at Grandma June's, innocent and warm, and tears pressed behind my eyes. Tomorrow at noon I would face Dominic Caruso and ask what he wanted. I lay in bed and tried to rehearse bravery, but my mind replayed Vanessa's laughter and Dominic's possession. My phone buzzed. I knew Riley would see the headlines before sunrise and show up. Part of me dreaded it. Part of me needed it. Alone, I might mistake fear for truth. At 7:10 a.m. my phone would not stop vibrating against the chipped nightstand. My eyes felt sandpaper dry, and yesterday's mascara had become a gray shadow under them. Zoey's tiny socks were still on the couch where she had kicked them off before Grandma June carried her out, and that little detail made my chest ache. The first notification was a gossip account I had never followed. Then an email from work landed with a subject line that looked innocent until I opened it and saw a link. Dominic Caruso. Mystery wife. Chicago charity gala. My face, half turned, caught mid-panic, was already being shared like a meme. If your life hit the internet overnight, what would you do first? Delete, deny, or disappear? I tried calling Grandma June, but I forced myself to stop after the first ring. Zoey would be eating waffles. June would be humming, trying to keep my child's morning normal. I did not want my fear to spill through the phone and land on Zoey like a stain. The lock clicked, and Riley Chin stepped in as if she had been authorized by the universe itself. She still wore her hospital scrubs under a winter coat, hair piled up, cheeks flushed from the cold. She had my spare key for emergencies, and she considered today an emergency with flashing lights. She took one look at me and did what she always did, scanned me like a chart. She noticed the tremor in my hands, the dark circles, the untouched coffee. Then she noticed the phone screen, and her whole posture changed from concern to combat readiness. I could practically feel her mentally rolling up her sleeves. I sat on the edge of the bed and told her everything, but not in neat order. It came out like I had been carrying a bag of broken glass and finally dropped it. Vanessa's smile, the way her friends laughed just a little too loud, the moment my heels caught and I realized they wanted me to fall. The sudden silence, Dominic's hand in mine, the sentence that turned me into his wife in front of everyone. The waltz that felt like protection and exposure at the same time. The limo door closing like a rulebook snapping shut. The way he knew I was a mom without asking. The plan for noon, a meeting for clarity, not romance, and my own shocking yes. Riley listened without interrupting, and that alone told me she was worried. When I finished, she exhaled slowly, the way people do when they are trying not to panic in front of someone they love. She made it clear, through her tone and her fierce eyes, that she did not care how rich Dominic was. She cared what he could do to my life, and more important, what his world could do to Zoey. That was the word that cracked me open. Zoey. I pictured a teacher pulling me aside, politely asking about rumors. I pictured another parent deciding my daughter was trouble by association. I pictured Zoey's father, Derek, using screenshots as proof I was unstable, even though he had missed birthdays and called it work. My hand started shaking again. Have you ever realized you are not scared for yourself, but for the little person who trusts you to keep them safe? Riley did not let me drown in those pictures. She moved into action, listing practical steps like she was triaging a crisis. She told me to keep Zoey at June's for now, to avoid school drop-off cameras, to screenshot anything threatening, and to stop answering unknown calls. She also reminded me of something I had forgotten in my spiral, that I was allowed to say no, even to powerful men, and especially to desperate coworkers. Then she did what Riley always does when fear shows up. She investigated. Her fingers flew over her phone as she pulled up articles, legal filings, and the kind of information you only find when you know where to look. I expected dirt, something that would make me regret ever touching Dominic's hand. What she found was more complicated. She showed me a report about a pediatric wing at a public hospital that had been renovated quietly, the donor listed as anonymous, but the paperwork pointing to a Caruso Foundation account. She also found a short interview snippet where a former employee described Dominic as ruthless in business but strict about one line: no harm to innocents. It did not make him safe. It did not make him good. But it shifted him from monster to human with a code, and that was somehow harder. My phone buzzed again. Noon. A single message that meant he was downstairs. My stomach flipped. Riley touched my shoulder, grounding me. She urged me to go, not to fall in love, but to collect truth, to set boundaries, and to come back with my dignity intact. I grabbed my coat, whispered a promise to myself about Zoey, and walked toward the door, and my heart kept sprinting. At a little before noon, Riley walked me downstairs like I was heading into court, not lunch. Dominic waited by the curb, calm as stone, and I hated how my pulse obeyed him. I checked my phone again for Grandma June's update about Zoey's morning, then forced it back into my pocket. The city air smelled like exhaust and winter. Dominic guided me into the back seat and I sat straight, rehearsing boundaries. No promises, no secrets, no letting my child become collateral. He asked for my trust. I decided to offer questions instead. That was safer than hope today. By 12:25 p.m. we were downtown, where horns argued with sirens and people hurried as if money had appointments. Dominic led me into a small Italian place tucked between glass towers. I expected a crowd, cameras, whispers. Instead, the door opened onto silence and warm garlic. No host, no diners, no clinking plates, only a candle already lit at a corner table. The emptiness felt staged, like the world had been paused for my reaction. Dominic watched me absorb it, then I understood. Privacy here was not requested. It had been bought, rented, commanded, arranged just for me today. I felt the pull of luxury and the push of suspicion at the same time. An empty restaurant meant no witnesses and no interruptions, but it also meant I was on his turf, inside his choices. I told myself what I refused, even if my voice stayed inside my head, would not be a symbol to parade, not a charity case, not a trophy to fix his image. I would not trade my autonomy for a tablecloth and good wine. Dominic pulled out my chair with old-fashioned care, and I sat because leaving without answers felt like surrender today. Dominic explained himself with clarity, and I listened like a mother listening for danger in a stranger's tone. He owned hotels, property, investments that looked clean on paper, and he also carried a shadow that made men watch their jokes. He did not deny it. He called it the part of the world he had inherited and mastered, the part that ran on loyalty and fear. Then he drew a line. He claimed he did not touch trafficking, did not harm innocents, did not make cruelty a hobby. It was not a confession. It was a contract he lived by. I had come for truth, so I forced the questions out in my mind, one by one, the way Riley would want them asked. Was there a wife hidden somewhere, a girlfriend waiting in a penthouse, a reason this was a game? Had he hurt people, and if so, why? He did not perform innocence. He admitted he had done violence when survival demanded it, and he admitted it without pride. He insisted he was not married, not attached, and that last night was not a prank. He said he chose the fastest shield, because reputation is what bullies understand. Then he brought up the rainy morning, and my breath caught because I had not thought anyone noticed. A bus had splashed a puddle near the stop, an older man had dropped groceries, and his grandson had started crying, hands red from cold. I had stepped under my umbrella, knelt in my work skirt, and gathered apples while commuters pretended not to see. Dominic had been across the street, coat collar up, watching without interrupting. He said that moment stayed with him because it had no audience, no payoff, only kindness. Hearing it, I felt both proud and strangely bare. Zoey came up the way she always does, like a bell inside my chest. I could handle gossip, I explained, but my daughter could not. The instant I mentioned her, Dominic's posture shifted. The steel stayed, but it turned outward, protective instead of possessive. He asked about her routine, who stayed with her, and my skin prickled until I realized he was building a safety plan, not collecting details for power. He made it clear that if his choices put her at risk, he would step back and disappear. Restraint like that scared me, because it sounded like responsibility real. Outside, the afternoon light felt bright after the quiet. Vanessa appeared near the curb, eyes swollen, apology written across her face. Dominic shifted between us like a door locking. I understood his instinct, but I needed my own ending. I stepped around him and let Vanessa see my calm. I forgave her, not to soothe her, but to free myself. Then I set the boundary she would hate. We were never friends. She would not get access to my life again, not my job, not my child, not my name. She backed away fast, and I breathed without tasting shame. Back inside the empty restaurant, the silence felt less like a trap and more like room to decide. Dominic offered dinner at his penthouse tomorrow night, no pressure, just a chance to talk where rumors could not reach. My instincts fought. One screamed no for Zoe's sake. Another whispered that clarity costs courage. I agreed, but only with boundaries. I choose the pace, I keep my independence, and I leave if it feels wrong. Dominic accepted that without argument, and that surprised me. When he walked me out, my phone buzzed, and I knew Riley would demand a report today. At 7 p.m. Ethan's car rolled up to my building, and my stomach tightened like it always does before I step into something unknown. I checked my mental list the way I check Zoe's lunchbox, phone charged, Grandma June still watching her, my keys in my coat pocket, and my boundaries ready. I told myself I was going for information, not romance, not rescue. Still, guilt pinched because bedtime stories belonged to me, not to anyone else. The elevator in my building smelled like detergent and Tuesday routines, and I felt myself leaving normal behind for the night ahead. Ethan opened the back door with that controlled ease of someone who notices everything, even the way my hands shook. His expression carried dry amusement, as if he had been drafted into a strange romantic comedy against his will. As we pulled away, he let me know Dominic had been restless all day, cleaning rooms that never needed cleaning, choosing wine like it was a negotiation, testing a recipe until it met his standard. Hearing that about the man who rewrote a ballroom with one sentence felt unreal. It made Dominic seem human, and that was somehow scarier to me. We stopped at a modern tower near the lake, and Ethan's attention sharpened as we entered, scanning corners and reflections like habit. The lobby was quiet, expensive, and too bright, with a front desk that greeted Dominic's name without surprise. A private elevator waited, unlocked by a small card in Ethan's hand. As we rose, my ears popped and my nerves climbed with them. When the doors opened, the city spread out in glass and lights, beautiful enough to hurt. I counted exits anyway, because beauty has never guaranteed safety in my life, and tonight I needed every advantage possible. The penthouse felt like a fortress designed by someone who hated clutter and loved control. Dark wood, clean lines, and windows from floor to ceiling. I could see boats like toys on the water below. Then I smelled garlic and simmering sauce, and the scene shifted. Dominic stood in the kitchen with his sleeves rolled up, stirring a pan like it mattered, hair slightly undone as if his hands had been through it. The contrast was almost funny. The man rumored to command men and money was focused on not burning dinner for a woman he barely knew in person. He guided me to the table with a gentle patience that made my shoulders drop. The first bite tasted like comfort, and I hated how quickly my body relaxed. We talked about ordinary things in the safest way, movies Zoey loved, my commute, his favorite late-night coffee. Somewhere between sips of water, I laughed, a real laugh that surprised me. Then I laughed again when he admitted Ethan was the only man alive who could tease him without consequences. The third time was quieter, when I realized I had not thought about Vanessa for several minutes and that mattered. Halfway through dinner his composure slipped, and I sensed a story he kept locked away. He had a younger sister living far from Chicago, protected from his world like a fragile treasure. He spoke of her with a careful tenderness that did not fit his reputation. Then he admitted the penthouse was quiet in a way that sometimes felt like punishment. People around him wanted things, and affection often arrived with a price tag. I listened, and empathy surprised me, because loneliness can live inside luxury. It did not erase his shadow, but it explained the hunger underneath his control. After dinner he led me to a smaller room, lit softer than the rest of the penthouse. Shelves of books rose to the ceiling, and one armchair faced a window like a private confession. A few framed photos sat on a table turned face down, as if he could not decide whether memory was comfort or weakness. He treated it as his quiet place, the corner where no one demanded anything. Standing there, I saw a man who collected silence because trust had been costly. It was a different kind of power, and it made my chest tighten with empathy again. Back in the main room, he stopped a careful distance away and waited, giving me space to choose. The pause mattered more than any charm. I could feel my fear and my curiosity arguing inside my ribs. He touched my hand, then my forehead with a tenderness that felt practiced in restraint. I nodded, not because I was helpless, but because I wanted to understand what safety could feel like. His kiss was brief and respectful, more promise than heat, and I pulled back, breathing fast. I was not swept away, I was aware, and strangely drawn to him tonight. Later, Dominic told me he wanted to meet Zoey, officially and respectfully, and he treated it like a request I could refuse. My heart reacted like a mother first, fear rising, then a small hope I tried to crush. He promised he would follow my lead, move slowly, and accept no if that was what kept her safe. That restraint hit harder than the skyline view. When Ethan drove me home, I watched the streetlights blur and knew the next step was unavoidable. Riley would demand to meet Dominic, and I would let her, because Zoey deserved certainty, not chaos. At 10 a.m. the cafe smelled like cinnamon and burnt espresso, the kind of place where students typed papers and retirees argued softly over pastries. I chose it because normal people were here, witnesses who didn't owe Dominic anything. Still, when he walked in, the room seemed to notice, not with fear, but with curiosity, like a tall shadow crossing sunlight. My hands kept finding my phone, checking for Grandma June's updates about Zoey. Riley slid into the booth beside me, shoulder to shoulder, her presence a seatbelt. Could he fit into my life without breaking it for me today? Riley watched Dominic the way she watched a patient who insisted they were fine. She noted his posture, the stillness in his hands, the way his eyes checked the door before they returned to me. She didn't fawn or soften, she treated him like a variable that could injure someone she loved. I saw her glance at his suit, then dismiss it, focusing instead on whether he interrupted, whether he listened, whether he respected space. Dominic didn't try to charm her. He waited through her silence and let it be heavy. I admired that restraint, even as it scared me. He acknowledged, in his steady way, that everything had moved too fast, that last night had been chaos, and that he had started it. He didn't apologize like a man trying to escape blame. He owned the choice because he believed public cruelty required public correction. He made it clear he wasn't asking Riley to like him, only to understand his intention: protect, not play. He promised he would not pull Zoey into headlines, would not approach my child without my permission, and would accept no if I gave it. Watching him, my skepticism weakened, and that frightened me too. Riley shifted her gaze to me and waited, the way she does when she knows I'm hiding the hardest truth. I let my breathing slow and admitted what I had been denying since the gala. I was scared because Dominic's world had teeth, and I was a mom with a girl who needed stability. I was fascinated because he didn't treat me like an inconvenience, he treated me like a person worth protecting. I was confused because protection can look like control if you've been alone too long. And I was ashamed of how good it felt to be seen. Riley didn't soften, but I felt her decision settle in the booth like a blanket. She approved for now, with conditions, and I knew she meant every one. She wanted transparency, schedules, and a way to reach me fast. She wanted Dominic to respect my work, my custody situation, and my right to walk away. She also wanted me to remember that love is not the same as safety, and safety is not the same as freedom. Her rules didn't feel controlling, they felt like someone building rails on a bridge. For the first time, I felt truly backed up. When we stepped outside, Ethan waited near the curb, hands in his coat pockets, looking like he belonged to weather and trouble. Riley's attention flicked to him, then back, then flicked again, and I nearly choked on my last sip of coffee. She pretended she was simply observing, but I knew her tells, the slight tilt of her chin, the quick smile she tried to hide. Ethan noticed too, and his eyes warmed with that restrained amusement. For a second, the whole situation felt almost normal, like friends meeting friends, not like my life was balancing on rumor and danger. Dominic followed us out and caught the moment without reacting like a jealous man. He simply registered it, the way he registered everything, then made a small, efficient decision. He asked Ethan, with a glance, to exchange numbers with Riley for a coffee sometime, framed as convenience, not pressure. Riley's eyebrows rose, impressed by the speed, and I felt heat crawl up my neck because the two of them suddenly looked like a subplot forming in real time. Ethan accepted the assignment with that calm professionalism, as if arranging a date was no stranger than arranging security right there, smiling. Back inside, the cafe warmth thinned as Dominic checked his phone, his focus sharpening the way it had at the gala. He didn't show the screen immediately, but Ethan's posture shifted and Riley's humor drained out of her face. Dominic finally angled the message toward me. It was short, vague, and cruelly polite, the kind that never uses names. It spoke of a weakness, a soft spot, a reason to cooperate. My mind jumped straight to Zoey. My hands turned ice. Suddenly breakfast stopped being a vetting moment and became a survival plan. I forced my voice steady for Riley. Dominic suggested we end the meeting and move, and I agreed because standing still felt like inviting a strike. Riley squeezed my hand under the table, a silent reminder to document everything and keep Zoey close to Grandma June for now. As we walked out, the city looked unchanged, but my life had a new fault line running through it. I kept picturing Monday morning at the office, coworkers whispering, Grant smiling too wide, everyone trying to use the scandal. Now there was more than gossip at stake. I climbed into Dominic's car, and my mind screamed Zoey all day. At 9:15 I walked into Lauren Creative with my badge trembling between my fingers. The same fluorescent ceiling buzzed, the same burnt coffee smell hovered, yet the air felt rearranged. Heads lifted, then dipped, as if looking at me too long could be risky. My inbox chimed with meeting invites I had never been included on. Someone held the elevator for me like I mattered. I kept my face neutral, but inside I was bracing for impact, thinking of Zoey's backpack and the fragile piece at Grandma June's. My heels sounded louder, as if the floor remembered me. People who used to brush past my desk now paused to greet me with syrupy concern. A designer-clad coworker complimented my hair, then glanced over her shoulder to see who noticed. Two interns whispered, stopped, and suddenly pretended to debate printer paper. Vanessa's friends drifted by in pairs, smiling too wide, avoiding my eyes like they were allergic to accountability. Grant's door stayed open, and I saw him watching me like I was a stock price. I wanted to laugh, but it came out as a quiet, tired disgust. The same office, but now every kindness carried a hidden receipt. Grant Sloan approached at mid-morning with a grin that looked borrowed. He praised my professionalism, my resilience, my so-called star quality, as if he had always noticed it. He leaned in, lowering his voice, and his meaning was obvious even before he finished. He wanted Dominic's name on our client list. He wanted introductions, handshakes, contracts, a shortcut into rooms we could not afford. He framed it as opportunity for my career, a promotion shaped like a leash. When I hesitated, he reminded me that loyalty gets rewarded, and implied my refusal would make me look ungrateful to him. I felt heat rise behind my ribs, not because I feared Grant, but because I finally saw the pattern cleanly. They had tolerated me when I was useful and small. They mocked me when I was different. Now they wanted to borrow my sudden protection like a ladder and climb over my back. I thought of my budget spreadsheet, my overtime, the nights Zoey fell asleep on my lap while I answered emails. Grant did not want me to succeed. He wanted me to deliver power. For the first time, I pictured quitting without panic, and it felt like oxygen. I opened my mouth to refuse Grant's request, but the office changed temperature behind me. Footsteps approached, measured and unhurried, and conversations died mid-syllable. I did not need to turn to know who it was, because my body reacted first, a familiar prickle along my arms. Dominic Caruso stood at the end of the aisle in a charcoal suit, holding a small paper bag of food as if he belonged in our fluorescent world. Every screen kept glowing, but no one dared type. Grant's grin collapsed, and I watched people swivel in their chairs like sunflowers toward a storm. Dominic greeted the room with courteous calm, then focused on Grant with a politeness that felt surgical. He referenced the gala without repeating insults, making it clear he had seen the contempt and remembered it. He pointed out that Grant had criticized my appearance, then tried to monetize my private life days later. He framed it as exploitation, not strategy. Dominic made it plain that I worked here because I chose to, not because I was trapped. If I left, I would be safe and supported. And if Grant pressured me again, Dominic could buy this place and remove him. A strange calm spread through me, like a bruise finally iced. I did not have to argue my worth. I did not have to prove I deserved respect. Dominic had done it in front of everyone with tone and timing alone. Part of me felt grateful, and part of me felt uneasy at the scale of his reach. I watched co-workers pretend to work while secretly listening, and I realized fear was the only language this office understood. Still, the relief was real. I could breathe without shrinking. When Dominic touched my elbow, it felt protective, and also dangerously permanent. In the elevator corridor, Dominic's expression shifted from public discipline to private concern. He told me, by implication and firm instruction, that today I should not follow my usual routine. He mentioned the message he had received, the one that danced around my daughter without naming her. My stomach dropped. He proposed security, different routes, fewer predictable stops, and he made it sound as practical as changing a password. I hated needing it, but I hated the alternative more. I texted Grandma June to keep Zoey inside, and my fingers shook. Outside, the windows looked harmless, yet I felt hunted. Dominic walked me past the reception desk, and the receptionist's smile trembled like she was greeting royalty. Ethan appeared near the entrance, already scanning the street, already coordinating without drama. I clutched my phone and pictured Zoey's face, bright and trusting, and I knew normal was gone for now. Dominic said we would talk later about options, including me leaving this job if I wanted. The word wanted echoed, because choice was what I had missed. As we stepped outside, cold air hit my lungs and I wondered where home was now. And protection suddenly felt like my first rule. By the time we stepped out of the office, my nerves were already sparking like live wires. Dominic kept his hand near my back, not gripping, just guiding, while Ethan scanned the sidewalk as if the city itself had teeth. I forced my face calm for anyone watching, then the moment the car door shut, I let my shoulders drop and my thoughts sprint straight to Zoey. It was 5:30 p.m., the hour my whole life usually turned into routine: after school pickup, a quick dinner, a bath, a story, a kiss, and the small miracle of her breathing evenly in sleep. Now that schedule collided with security protocol. Dominic explained, in plain terms I could actually hold, that a rival crew was testing him. They were not attacking him directly yet. They were tapping the glass near his weakest point and waiting to see if he cracked, and lately that weak point had my name attached to it. I wanted to scream that I never asked to be anyone's weakness. I wanted to rewind to last week when my biggest fear was Vanessa's laughter. Instead, I texted Grandma June to keep Zoey inside until I arrived, and I called Riley with my voice carefully steady. Riley did not waste time with comfort. Help was not ownership, she reminded me, and consent mattered even in emergencies. Dominic's plan unfolded like a checklist. We would change routes, stop posting patterns, and treat my apartment like a location, not a home. Two men I had not met would rotate outside Grandma June's building, and cameras would cover entrances at the penthouse. He showed me a small safe room on a tablet screen, described it as boring on purpose, and promised it was where he would rather have me complain than be brave. I hated how relieved that made me feel. Halfway to June's, the first near miss happened. I noticed a dark sedan that seemed to turn whenever we turned, never far enough to ignore. Ethan caught it too. Dominic's posture changed, subtle but immediate, like a door locking. He instructed Ethan to loop the block twice, then switched to a busier street. The sedan hesitated at a light, and for a heartbeat I saw the driver's face angled toward us before it slid away into traffic. My mouth went dry. What would you do if the safest place for your child was not your own home anymore? At June's, Zoey ran to me with the uncomplicated joy kids carry, and I nearly fell apart. I held her longer than usual, breathing in shampoo and crayons, and tried to hide my shaking. June read my face and nodded once, trusting me without questions. We packed fast: pajamas, her favorite book, her stuffed rabbit, medicine, school shoes, and the small photo she kept of us on the fridge. I moved like a thief in my own life, stealing pieces of normal before someone else could. Riley met us downstairs, still in scrubs, eyes sharp. She hugged Zoey, then pulled me into a quick squeeze that felt like armor. She checked June's locks, reminded me to keep Derek uninformed until we had a legal plan, and promised she would stay reachable all night. Her support steadied me, but it also made the decision real. I was choosing a fortress over my apartment. I was choosing inconvenience over danger. I was choosing my daughter. The private elevator in Dominic's building opened onto quiet luxury and waiting security. Zoey's eyes went wide at the height and the lights, but she stayed close to my leg, cautious the way she is in new places. Dominic approached slowly and lowered himself to her level, hands visible, posture gentle. He did not demand a hug, did not call her his anything, did not make promises that sounded like cartoons. He offered calm, like a warm blanket, and he asked for permission with his patience. Zoey studied him, then studied me, and I felt my heart split between fear and hope. Have you ever watched your child decide whether to trust someone, and realized you were learning from them? We ate simple food because I could not stomach celebration. Zoey wandered the penthouse like it was a museum, touching nothing, asking questions with her eyes. Dominic answered with softness, showing her the window view and the guest room prepared for her, then letting her retreat when she needed. By bedtime, she was exhausted from newness. I read her story in a whisper, and when her breathing finally evened out, I sat on the edge of the bed and listened to the city below. Dominic returned to the living room already in motion, phone in hand, focus sharpened. He told me he had to confront the rival threat personally, quickly, to draw a boundary they would understand. He promised he would come back, and I believed him only because I had no choice. Ethan and the guards moved with purpose around him. I walked Dominic to the elevator, my fingers tight around his sleeve, and I let him see my fear without shame. After the doors closed, the penthouse felt too large. Security stood outside like silent furniture. Zoey slept behind a closed door. I stared at the clock, counting minutes as if counting could keep him safe, waiting for the elevator chime that would either break me or bring him home. At 1:10 a.m. the penthouse looked like a museum after closing, all glass and shadow and silent guards who did not blink. I kept moving anyway, because stillness let my mind sprint. I checked the lock on Zoey's door for the third time, then the front door I would never touch, then the windows that were too high to matter. The city glittered below like it had no idea I was afraid. My heart kept asking the same question: what did I bring my child into tonight? Every few minutes a faint murmur crackled from a guard's radio outside the living room, short codes that meant nothing to me and everything to them. I flinched at each buzz like it was a knock. I tried to breathe the way Grandma June taught Zoey, slow in, slower out, but my lungs refused to cooperate. I stared at the clock, then at the safe room door Dominic had pointed out, then at the soft blanket on the couch where I had promised myself I would sit. I never sat. Zoey had fallen asleep after insisting the stuffed rabbit had to see the skyline too. Her hair fanned across the pillow, and her little hand still held the rabbit's ear. I brushed a kiss onto her forehead and felt the guilt punch through me again. This was supposed to be my job, to keep her world simple. Instead, I had invited armed routines and whispered threats into her bedtime. I sent Riley a single text that meant I was holding on. Her reply came fast, all anchor and no fluff, reminding me I was doing the hard, right thing. I wandered back to the kitchen and lined up bandages and antiseptic wipes like setting out school supplies, because planning was the only way I stayed sane. I remembered Dominic's calm eyes when he promised he would come back, and I hated how much I wanted to believe him. Would you forgive a man for scaring you if he also made your child feel safe? I did not know, but I knew I could not afford a breakdown. Not with Zoey behind that door. The elevator chime finally rang, soft and bright, and my whole body jolted as if the sound had touched a nerve. The guard straightened. I stepped forward, then stopped, afraid of what I might see. The doors opened and Dominic walked out, shoulders set, face controlled, but his sleeve was darkened at the forearm. Not a pool, not a horror scene, just enough red to make my throat close. My relief exploded into anger so quickly it frightened me. I pulled him toward the kitchen light and made him sit, because if I could make him sit, I could make the world obey for 1 minute. My hands moved on instinct, the same instinct that ties shoelaces and wipes tears and checks fevers at midnight. I rolled his sleeve carefully and saw a shallow cut, the kind that stings more than it harms, and I cleaned it anyway with shaking fingers. He tried to downplay it with that stubborn calm of his, but I refused to let him turn my fear into politeness. As I wrapped the bandage, he let his mask slip just enough for me to see exhaustion underneath. He told me the threat had been addressed, the message answered, the boundary drawn in a language those men understood. He made it clear he had done it to remove danger from our door, not to prove anything. Zoey was safe, he insisted, and the guards outside were not decoration. Hearing that word safe loosened something in my chest, and the tears I had been swallowing all night finally rose. He lifted my hands and pressed them against his heartbeat, grounding me with the simple fact that he was here. In that quiet, he admitted the truth he had avoided in public. Calling me his wife at the gala had begun as strategy, a fast shield against cruelty. But every hour since had turned the lie into a promise he could not unmake. He did not offer a speech. He offered a choice. He knelt on the wood floor like the penthouse did not matter, only my answer did, and he asked to make it real, legally, openly, and forever. My first thought was Zoey. My second was fear. Dominic was intense, and his world was sharp, and I was still learning the edges. I could not pretend love erased risk. But I also could not deny what he had shown me: respect when I set boundaries, patience when I hesitated, protection aimed outward instead of inward, and a willingness to be judged by the people who mattered to me. I imagined a future where I stopped shrinking at work, where Zoey slept without my anxiety leaking into her dreams. I told him yes, and I meant partnership, not surrender. After, the penthouse felt different, less like a fortress and more like a home we might build on purpose. Dominic promised we would move carefully, involve Riley, involve lawyers, protect Zoey's routines, and keep my choices mine. I looked at the small symbol of commitment he placed in my hand and felt the weight of permanence without panic. Somewhere below, Chicago kept moving, unaware. Inside, I understood my life had crossed a line that could not be uncrossed. Tomorrow would bring planning, consequences for the people who hurt me, and a new kind of courage I was only beginning to practice. In the morning I would call Grandma June, then Riley, then my lawyer, and I would face work like a woman who finally believed she deserved respect. At 3 p.m. the church in Old Town glowed with warm light, and my hands shook inside lace sleeves I never imagined owning. Zoey stood beside Riley in a simple white dress, holding a basket like it was a treasure chest. Grandma June adjusted my veil with peppermint breath and steady fingers. Outside, Chicago traffic hummed, but inside the air smelled of candles and clean wood. I kept thinking about lunch boxes and school drop-offs, then reminded myself this day was for stability too. My heartbeat said run, yet my feet stayed because Zoey watched me with fearless trust. Dominic waited near the front pews, not smiling for cameras, just watching me as if my nerves mattered more than the crowd. His suit was plain, dark, and perfect, but what struck me was the stillness in his shoulders, like he had decided to be gentle on purpose. I remembered the gala and the way he borrowed my name to stop cruelty, then I remembered the nights after, when he listened instead of demanding. A choir began, and I walked slowly, counting each step like a promise to my daughter and myself and to the future I refused to fear. When it came time for vows, I did not hear poetry, I heard decisions. Dominic promised protection that never swallowed my choices, respect that showed up in small routines, and loyalty that would not punish me for speaking. He pledged to treat Zoey as a person, not a symbol, and to earn her trust slowly. In my own promise, I committed to honesty, to challenging him when fear tried to rule, and to never shrinking again for anyone. I promised to keep my kindness, but add boundaries, and to build a home with truth even when world demanded I bend. After the blessing, the church exhaled with applause, and I felt Dominic's hand steady my waist as if he knew my knees might fail. Our kiss was brief, warm, and respectful, more relief than heat, and Zoey clapped with innocent seriousness that made me laugh through tears. Riley wiped her own eyes and pretended she was just tired from night shifts. Grandma June looked at me like she had been waiting years for me to believe I deserved goodness. We walked out into crisp air, and the city seemed to nod, not knowing our story but blessing it anyway today. At 8:40 p.m., during the reception, the reckoning arrived quietly, like a door clicking shut. I learned Vanessa had been removed from accounts after her behavior became a liability, and the industry circles she loved began excluding her without drama. Grant lost his position after a review of harassment complaints, ones I was not the only person to file once fear was gone. Dominic did not announce any of it. He made it clear that cruelty had consequences, and that my dignity was not negotiable. I did not feel joy at their pain, only freedom from their control anymore. Dominic offered me options the way other people offer napkins, effortlessly. He could fund a new role, buy my contract out, or set me up with resources so I never had to tolerate that office again. But he also waited for my answer, and that was the difference. I chose to leave Lauren Creative on my own terms and join a small nonprofit marketing team Riley had connections to, one focused on families and safe housing. The pay was modest, the work was real, and my name belonged to me. Dominic respected that choice without trying to improve it either. 1 year later, our mornings were quieter. Zoey packed her backpack and reminded me about library day, and I no longer checked windows before pouring cereal. Grandma June visited weekend, her laugh filling the kitchen like sunlight. Riley stopped by after shifts with takeout and opinions, and Ethan sometimes appeared with coffee, pretending it was coincidence. Dominic and I learned how to disagree without fear, how to apologize, and how to plan life around school plays instead of threats. The penthouse still had guards, but it had drawings on the fridge and a rabbit on the couch. That was victory. Sometimes I think back to the gala, to Vanessa's laugh and my cheap dress, and I realize the deepest wound was not their words, it was my belief that I deserved them. Have you ever mistaken humiliation for your identity? I used to confuse endurance with strength. Now I know strength is choosing boundaries without turning bitter, and choosing love without losing yourself. Dominic did not save me from life, he stood beside me while I saved myself. My kindness stayed, but it gained a spine. And my daughter learned that being gentle does not mean being small ever again. I am grateful for Riley, who loved me enough to interrogate my happiness, and for Grandma June, who held our world steady when mine shook. I am grateful for Ethan's quiet competence, even when he pretended he was not part of our family story. Most of all, I am grateful for the moment I stopped begging for respect. Dominic's power mattered, but my decision mattered more. I chose to be seen, to speak, to walk away from places that fed on my silence. Love did not erase risk, but it gave me courage to face it calmly for Zoey, always. If you are listening and you have ever been laughed at for what you could not afford, remember this: the laugh is not your name. You can be kind and still demand respect. You can accept love and still keep your voice. What would you do if one brave boundary could change your whole life? If this story touched you, like, share, and leave a comment about the moment you decided to stop shrinking. I read them, and they matter. Thank you for being here with me. Tell me what helped you stand when it hurt.